Hey everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5-Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Hey Rush Nation, I'm back. It's time for some bonus material here on the YouTube channel. This might also go out in podcast form, yet to be determined. But given how important it is the next couple of weeks, I want to give you some exclusive content that's going to help you get into your playoffs effectively. So if you're sitting there on 4 wins, 5 wins, 6 wins, 7 wins, in particular, this is going to pay a lot of attention and resonance to you. There's a lot of things that you can still do that will influence the outcome of the season. And the last thing you want to do is give up on fantasy playoffs by not doing everything in your power. So I've put together a list of the top 10 things that you can do and you have control over that will help you make your playoffs. This isn't obviously guaranteed. It obviously depends on your schedule, depends on a lot of things. But this is the way that if you're going to go down, you're going to go down swinging. And if you're not going to go down, this could be the difference between you making the playoffs or not, whether it's points difference, whether it's on record, merit, whatever it might be. So I find this is a really important exercise. And these are the sorts of things that I've been doing over the last few years. I've shared some of these in the past on previous podcasts, but I decided to collate them all together and give you a definitive top 10 list of things steps that will help you make your playoffs. So top 10 steps of things that will help you make your playoffs. And it's something you can refer to. It'll be on our YouTube channel, things you can refer to every year to really help. So I'm going to start with number 1, and it's looking at your remaining matchups. And your remaining schedule for how you get into your playoffs. So don't worry about the other teams and the teams around you and what their schedule is. Let that kind of take care of itself. You can't control that. But look at the teams you're facing, whether that's 1 remaining fixture, 2 remaining fixtures, 3 remaining fixtures. Have a look at who you've got. Have a look at their team. Look at what strengths they have. Who are the best players on their team? What are their weaknesses? What are the areas that you can really gain an advantage over? What do they have players of Carolina and Tampa Bay that are on bye? So do they have a Godwin, a Gronk, a Brady, a DJ Moore, a Mike Davis, a Christian McCaffrey? Do they have these players? And are they going to be on bye? Are they carrying injuries? Are they struggling to set a lineup every week and they started really well and they've faded off, or are struggling at the bottom of the table? Or are you facing a team that's really on form right now? But you can have a look at that. And there's so many ways that this is really important, because ultimately what you need to do is you need to find ways that you can gain that advantage. And most of that's through the waiver wire. So if you know that they've got the Tampa Bay defense in week 13, and that's when you're playing them, start picking up some defenses that are going to have an impact. So if you look at the best potential waiver wire options for week 13 defenses, and haven't got there yet, but have a look at the schedules and have a look and see, is there someone out there that you can use that is going to help you or is going to help them beat you? So that's something that you really need to consider. So for example, some plum matchups for that sort of week, remaining games between now and the end of the season. The best matchups are like Seattle, Dallas, but if I go specifically into week 13, I'm just pulling it up now. If you're looking at the week 13 schedule, then you'll be wanting to target those that are playing the Jets, for example, those that are playing Washington. So, the Steelers probably not going to be well owned, or are well owned, probably not going to be on your waiver wire. But looking at this now, I'm seeing Chargers versus the Patriots. The Chargers could be a defense that are worth owning. Broncos against the Chiefs is not one I'd want to touch. Bills at 49ers. Doubt the Bills are overly owned, but if they're out there, Raiders. Now the Raiders D is the one I'd want to be getting here. They're playing the Jets. So I'd be looking at picking up the Raiders D if they've got Carolina, which I doubt, or the Buccaneers defense. Go get the Raiders D, stash that. Go get the Seahawks D. They've got the Giants potentially. That could be a useful one. The Vikings against the Jags. If Minshew isn't back, that could be another potential. Dolphins, Bengals. That's another one. Miami. These are all really good matchups that you should be considering. So I really like trying to find ways to block other players from succeeding. If they've got wide receivers that are on bye, start taking additional wide receivers. Dilute the pool, dilute the pool even, and go ahead and just really make it tight. Really go ahead and do the best you can do by making it difficult for them to make waiver claims, and try and do as much of it in advance. And then the week of, put in a ton of waiver claims. It's going to lead to a point I'm going to get to later on. But really, the whole thing you've got to do now is focus on the next 2 weeks. Don't focus too far ahead and focus on the playoffs, because you might not get there. The same token, don't worry about stashing a ton of players for a rainy day, because again, might also not happen. So you need to think about just what you can do, what you can control over the next 2 weeks. So look at the areas where they might need to pick up players, buys, injuries, and then try and exploit that as much as possible. Moving on to step 2, it's managing your buys. So if you have week 13 buys, if you have Tampa, if you have Carolina players, get cover for them now. If it's, for example, a kicker, release the kicker. They're not going to make a big difference. Cut them from your roster now. Go get a good kicker now. There's Tyler Bass is one that would be more than adequate replacement for both your kickers if you've got any of them. Just do it now, and then you don't have to worry about it. And that's one less waiver claim you have to waste when you really need to make a lot of additional ads. In fact, don't even wait till waivers. Wait till waivers clear this week. So do it on Wednesday, Thursday. Go get Tyler Bass and just make a change now and just stay ahead of it. DST, potentially the same. Probably don't want to play the Tampa D anyway this week, because they've got the Chiefs, and then they've also got a bye in week 13. So you could probably get rid of them, or you can stash them and pick up another D to play in both. Either's fine, whatever you feel more comfortable with. Quarterback, probably the same. Probably want to be replacing Brady. If the waiver wire is then out there, just keep him and bring in somebody else, or let him go and use the extra spots to get into the playoffs. Again, don't worry about the playoffs until you're in it. Worry about getting there. And then once you're in it, then you can start to focus on it a bit more. So yeah, manage your buys now. Get ahead of your buys, and then don't go into week 13 thinking, oh God, I've got these players on buy. You should know that they're on buy. You should already have the replacements in. You should know pretty much who you're going to start. Trim your roster. This is step 3. Trim your roster of dead weight. So get rid of players who don't need to be on your roster. So there's some really good examples of players that are just sitting around on rosters that people think they need to own on the fact that they're going to come good, or they've been good and they're no longer good, and you're hoping that the fortune's going to turn around. Here's some names of players you can drop. Mark Ingram, Jarvis Landry, Rashard Higgins, Travis Fulgham. These are all players that sit in that realm of, oh, well, they could go off. No, they just cut them now. They're done. They're done. You don't need them. Players that you're just sort of holding on to in the hopes that they come good, cut them. Unless they're a genuine handcuff, then they're about to see a massive uplift in volume, get rid of them. I'd rather have boom or bust. Here's an example. I'd rather have Sammy Watkins right now than I would have Jarvis Landry, because I know Watkins can go out there and get me a 0, but I also know he can get me 20. And that's the difference. His ceiling is up there. You want to be accruing players that have a high ceiling. Michael Pittman is out there, for example. He is a player you must own over any of the names I've mentioned, because his ceiling is trajectorying upwards. It's going upwards and upwards every single week. So if you are carrying extra positional cover, so if you have a tight end like Dallas Goedert or Travis Kelce, Darren Waller, any of those guys, with the exception of Gronk, because Gronk still has his bye, cut the rest of your tight ends on your roster. You're never starting them. You don't need them. Unless you get Jordan Reed and you think he's going to play a flex spot, that's fine. I get that play. Anything else, just cut them. Get rid of all the extra dead weight. Anyone that's not going to make your roster, anyone that's not going to make your starting lineup, cut. You need to bring in a lot of players this week. You want to free up as many roster spots as possible and go raid the waiver wire for people like Gus Edwards this week. Go get people like Michael Pittman. Go get, potentially Daniel Jones if you need a high ceiling quarterback, because he has that in him, over some of the things that you might be doing right now. If you gave me a choice the rest of the season, Daniel Jones or Carson Wentz, I'm taking Daniel Jones. I'm taking Kirk Cousins over Carson Wentz. So if these are the situations you've got Carson Wentz on your bench, cut him. Just cut him. Go get someone better who's got more upside, because that's going to be important. That's what's going to get you through. Number 4, look at your players' schedules. Who has a bad schedule going in? Who has a good schedule going in? And this is really important. It's something that not a lot of fantasy players do, but this is something that's really important. So I'm just going to go through for remaining games, and I'm going to tell you the top 5 and worst 5 at each position in terms of schedules. So from now until the end of the season, Tampa Bay have the easiest schedule for quarterback, even though they also have a bye in there. The Rams and Jared Goff have number 2. Daniel Jones, who I just mentioned, the 3rd easiest schedule. Derek Carr has the 4th. Nick Mullins, although he is Nick Mullins, the 5th. New Orleans 6th. Okay. Justin Herbert's in the top 10 there as well. The 5 worst. Kyler Murray is the worst schedule. Deshaun Watson, 2nd worst schedule. Aaron Rodgers, 3rd worst schedule. Josh Allen, the 4th worst schedule. And then Teddy Bridgewater and Carolina, the 5th worst schedule coming in for the rest of the season. Now, obviously, if you've got those 4 I mentioned at the bottom, you're a little panicked. At the end of the day, they're still all supreme talents. Deshaun Watson's probably the one that you have to be a little bit more worried about because of the supporting cast around him, but the others are all supreme talents. They should be okay. And that just means just be alert for it. But I think with those worst schedules, I wouldn't be too worried given the level of talent. But it does mean that players like Daniel Jones, like David Carr, they have relevance. Jared Goff have relevance. These are the sorts of players that could, really help you out for the remainder of the season, then also going into the playoffs. When I'm looking at running backs, David Montgomery has the easiest schedule remaining. So if you've got David Montgomery and you've been worried about him, you should be in good shape. Derrick Henry is the 2nd. The Indianapolis backfield, so that's Hines and Taylor. They have Wilkins even. They all have an easier schedule. Detroit and DeAndre Swift have the 4th easiest schedule, but if he is injured, then you've got to be picking up Peterson or Kerryon Johnson because they have an easy schedule remaining. And the same with Jamal Williams. So Green Bay, because Aaron Jones and Green Bay have the 5th easiest run schedule remaining on the season. If he goes down, Jamal Williams becomes an RB1. He did that. I can't remember if it was last season or the season before. So that's something to be well aware of. Arizona have the 2nd worst schedule when it comes to running backs, fantasy running backs. So, Drake and Edmonds, we had that debate on the show on Monday night. At the end of the day, they got a tough schedule. Buffalo, which means if you've got Devin Singletary on your roster, you can pretty much cut him because he's not going to be doing anything over the next few weeks. Pittsburgh and James Conner, that will give you some food for thought. Ezekiel Elliott and Dallas, they got the 28th, so the 5th hardest schedule. 5th hardest schedule. And CEH and Lev Bell have the 3rd hardest running schedule for remaining. A lot of that's influenced by Tampa next week. But it might mean Lev Bell might be someone that you could be tempted with on the waivers. Probably best not to at this stage. Wide receiver, Darius Slayton and Sterling Shepard have the easiest schedule coming in for the remainder of the season. The Rams have the 2nd easiest. Philadelphia have the 3rd, but is there a wide receiver on that roster you really want to own? Terry McLaurin and Washington have the 4th, but again, other than Terry McLaurin, is there really a wide receiver on there you want to own? And Baltimore with the 5th, and again, is there a wide receiver on that roster you really want to own? So the teams with the easiest schedules actually don't have great depth at the wide receiver position, but it means that players like Steven Sims might come into play between now and the end of the season. Marquise Brown, if you've been holding on to him, his schedule now gets a lot easier. But it also means that maybe Miles Boykin might be relevant for the rest of the season, or Willie Snead, for example. So take a look at that. Josh Reynolds, who I think is one of the best kept secrets in fantasy football, he's definitely someone I'd be owning in a lot more leagues. Same way as Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton, you can feel comfortable playing them now for the rest of the season. Alternatively, again, Arizona have the worst schedule when it comes to wide receivers. So again, that's arrows down for Drake, for Kirk, and for Fitzgerald and everybody else, then Hopkins. So something to consider. I think Hopkins overcomes that talent a little bit, and Murray does as well, but it's something to keep an eye on, especially for the supporting cast. Pittsburgh, they've got the second hardest schedule. So again, if you've got Claypool and Deontay Johnson, maybe diverse some of that a little bit. Seattle have the 30th. So again, if you've been relying on DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, maybe get some additional help. Dallas, the 29th, so fourth hardest schedule. Again, there's some players there to be considering getting some additional cover for. I think Michael Gallup is droppable as a result of that. So that's something you can be aware of. And Denver in the fifth worst, and given that they're not really producing a high volume offense with lots of points, I'd argue that almost anybody there, with the exception of Jerry Jeudy and Noah Fant, are droppable as a result. Tight ends, Tampa have the third easiest schedule, which is good news for Gronk, but he has a bye. New Orleans, Jared Cook. So you've been panicking about Jared Cook. His schedule is about to get easier, but it's all about who's actually going to be throwing him the ball. Green Bay and Robert Tonyan. I mentioned Robert Tonyan on the Waiver Wire podcast. He actually has the easiest tight end schedule remaining for the rest of the season. That's good news for him. I mentioned Noah Fant. He has the fifth easiest schedule coming in, so that should be a good place for him. Pittsburgh and Eric Ebron as well is another good spot. So if Eric Ebron is on your waiver wire list, go grab him. His schedule opens up nicely for tight ends. The Rams have the worst. So if you've got Everett and Higbee and you'd be a bit worried, they are droppable effectively as of now. Washington and Logan Thomas has a difficult schedule. Cincinnati don't really have a viable tight end anyway that's worth playing, nor do Buffalo. They have the 29th and 31st hardest schedules each, and same with Arizona, they have the 28th. So Arizona's schedule is just telling you across the board in all the skilled positions is pretty bad. And then I'm not going to delve too much into kickers and DSTs, but the Rams open up if Matt Gay's out there. He's someone that could be useful. Will Lutz probably isn't out there. Joey Sly will be useful, but again, he's got a bye to contend with. Matt Prater and Crosby have the also easiest schedules, whether it's a bit harder for Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Atlanta, Indianapolis, and the Jets. So that gives you a bit of a view and something to think about. So take some notes. You'll probably need to play this through a couple of times to get all the notes from here. But I'll also try and share the chart on Twitter if I can, just to help you out as much as possible. Going to step number 5, pick up a lot of handcuffs, whoever you can get at this stage. That's handcuffs for wide receivers and handcuffs for tight ends. So Russell Gage is someone who, if Julio Jones is out, he becomes immediately a bit more impactful and useful. I mentioned Tony Pollard in the Waiver Wire podcast. He should be owned a lot more. Samanju Perine is another one potentially. Although the game scripts I think go against them, but that's another one to consider. Jamal Williams, as we've already talked about the schedule here in this podcast, is one that must own. So go out and pick him up. That could be a real steal if something happens to Aaron Jones, as we know it has done in the past. So go pick up those handcuffs. They could really be the difference between you making the playoffs or not. Number 6, take lineup risks. No good playing safe unless you're a favorite in a matchup. So if you're trailing, you're going to go up against a top 2 team in your fantasy league, go all out. If you've got a start-sit decision between, I'm just trying to think of a good example here. Let's say Chris Godwin or Darius Slayton. I wouldn't blame you for going Darius Slayton, given his schedule, given what he's got going on ahead. That could be a great example of a matchup that on paper doesn't make a lot of sense, but actually could yield really positive earnings for you, given that Godwin has a lot of competition for targets and Slayton doesn't. So that's something, in those examples, if you're trailing, take those risks. They'll pay off for you. And if they don't, then they don't, but at least you can say you went down swinging. There's nothing worse than just going with a sure, steady approach, going, I have to play Godwin because I invested a second round. third round pick on him, and therefore I have to start him. No, you don't. If the matchup is telling you that there is a potentially better matchup out there, and this week it particularly could be, you can make that argument. That's not saying my rankings I'm going to put Slayton over Godwin, but the upside is there with Slayton. Slayton could go and have a 30, 40 point week. He's done it before. I can understand the logic of throwing the kitchen sink at it. It's a pretty hard thing to do, but if you're desperate and this is do or die, do it. Same way if you're favouring your matchup, and we'll get to another tip in a minute that will help with this, then you obviously play the more conservative, because you just got to try and stay ahead. But if you're trading, just go to kitchen sink. Go with the boom or bust players, Sammy Watkins, the Darius Slaytons, for example. This leads me on to number 7. Use season averages to do the maths and see the projected scores. Where do you sit? Mix your lineups a bit. So what I mean by this is look at the season total averages of those players, and points per game average, not the total points, because they might have missed games, injuries, etc. So start looking at those, mess with your lineups a little bit, see what that kind of looks like. Just as an example, play with different numbers. And then what you do is look at the players that you've got in your lineups, and on your roster, and see what their best game of the season was. And then say, well, if I put the best team out with their best game, their absolute ceiling, if everything fell for them this season as it has, what would that look like? Does that give me a path to victory? And that should just start playing with those a little bit, and it will help you visualize a little bit more about putting out a potential lineup that you could win. And that's the difference. So look at the players who have the highest ceiling and look to maybe get more of those players in your rosters if you need them. Number 8, play mind games. Start posting messages in your group chats, in your league formats. Drop some memes, putting out info that you want to scare your opponents with. That is true. Ultimately, you could try a false one that gets found out pretty quickly in the world of social media. But you could use things to your advantage. So if someone's got an injury this week, like Lamika P. if someone has them in their roster thinking about playing them, so it doesn't look like he's going to play this week, get him to move away from it. Obviously, you probably want a better example than that. So-and-so's carrying an injury designation, or maybe they're not going to play this week. If it's someone like a Travis Kelce who can make a game difference here, I'm not saying he does, by the way, it's just an example. Use that, fuel the fire a little bit. Really get someone else in your league to really buy into that, and then watch just keep fanning the flames. Put the seed of doubt in your opponent's mind. Make them do something stupid. Believe it or not, it works more times than it should. So do that. Just start to put some information out there. Also, and so it's got the whole questionable tag, or doesn't look like they're going to go this week. And cast doubt in their minds. You never know, they might make the change to the lineup, might not get time to set the lineup on Sunday. These sorts of things happen. Just give it a spin. You've got nothing to lose. Number 9, interact with us and others for ideas. Groupthink is kind of the best way to do this. So share lineups on Twitter, tag us in them. We can retweet them, help you get a group discussion on those. Send us emails, send us DMs with lineups. We can try and help as much as we can for the ones that we see and the ones we can respond to. We do sometimes get a lot of requests, and sometimes takes a bit long to get back to them. So that's really important. But use groupthink. Use us, use others, build a community, and share those lineups saying, hey, look, how do I get through this week? What are you thinking? I'm thinking about doing something really crazy here. Am I mad? Do I think it works? Share the information, see what other information people have. Information gathering, have all the pieces of the puzzle to make that informed decision is really important. The last one, I've said this so many times and people still don't do it, and it's crazy. But number 10 is follow the beat reporters. Be the first person with the info. You've got to, this is the time now that you need to outwork the remaining people in your league if you're desperate to get in. So you need to follow beat reporters. You need to be the first one with the breaking news alerts. You need to be the first one that can make a quick ad drop claim when nobody else has seen the news. That, if you look at yesterday, if that had been Wednesday and you were in a league where free agency cleared, you had to be the one to be picking up Gus Edwards. These are the sorts of things and advantages. So following those beat writers, and being on top of it is a really, really good way and smart way of outworking your opponents, outworking the league. Get those waiver claims in, really make it difficult, and give yourself all the pieces and all the chances to make the playoffs. That's the key. So there you go, 10 steps to help you make the playoffs. These have worked for me for years. Whenever clutch has come to it, and we're at this point in the season where I need to win 1 of 2 or 2 of 2 to get in, these tactics have all worked in some way, in some capacity. So I pass them on to you. I hope you find them useful. I hope that you really benefit from them and you get into your playoffs and share the success stories. Please do, because the more people that talk about these sorts of things and share them, the more people will, will not just buy into what we do, but it just makes for a more fancy, better discussion with fantasy football. It helps us out. It's a way of paying it forward. And I know most people will go, I don't want to share this. This stuff is gold. I appreciate that. And I appreciate it more than most. And I've got a few tips and tricks that I can share with you privately that might help. Give private coaching if you're prepared to share out this video and get us more views and get more people interested in the game of fantasy football. So that will do it. 10 steps to help you make the playoffs. Let us know how you get on. Share it on Twitter at 5 Yard Rush. Share this video on Facebook and anywhere else, anywhere that's going to give you the maximum advantage. But until next time, Rush Nation, keep rushing.